In a world of aspirations, big plans, and expectations, have you ever considered the power of forgiveness? Let's explore forgiveness. I'm Roach, Mark Roach. I'm here to help you get what you want and what you need to understand the difference. Just recently, I've watched several people be brutally hard on themselves. Do you do that? Well, let's look at the pluses and minuses, the benefits and the disadvantages of being hard on yourself. Then let's examine forgiveness and how it operates across all planes of our existence. I watched 3 highly accomplished men confess their failures. One in particular set his standards so high that neither he, and here's the kicker, or anyone around him could live up to those high standards. That drive for material success, the predictability, the dogmatic behaviors, the regimented and the high discipline, the repeatability of this drive was much a part of their success, of all 3 of these success, but this man in particular. So on the other hand, these traits of drive that led them to success on one hand led to problems and neglect in their family and personal lives. Their drives to provide for others that they loved and who were close to them and who they were loyal to and went home to every night or maybe every weekend, overshadowed the needs of those people for love, care, nurture, and intimacy, and all of that's necessary for genuine connection with others. So these 3 men, and this one in particular who shared a lot with me just recently, were dealing with that neglect and trying to reconcile that failure with all of the success, and they equated the 2 as a sacrifice that they made, and nothing was changing in their life, and they were trying to find a way to go forward, to live under some new conditions that had evolved in their life. Let me jump over to a woman that I observed. She was a very frugal and an older woman who had been very good about supporting the men in her life. And she herself had lived with some degree of denial and suffering and sacrifice. In fact, she was so good at denying herself that she had compiled not a small fortune, but a large fortune. So on one hand, she'd attracted some very powerful, popular, and successful men in her day. She'd been loyal and true, and she praised their heartfelt efforts and supported and celebrated their successes. And all of this had been recognized in their community, and she'd been at their side. And after these men passed, she eventually was faced with letting go of the past and realizing that she was wanting to be recognized for who she is rather than who she had served and supported. But these patterns had been set so deep in her psyche and in her spiritual life, the rules that she had lived by were no longer supportive of how she was needing to live in the now, in the current moment. So the pattern that had served her was no longer helping. She'd built this fortune by being frugal, supportive, and loyal, and and was celebrated in the community, but she found it difficult to connect now that these men were gone. There was nobody to use this strategy with in her life anymore. And so her strategies of being frugal and loyal had left her dealing with some of her own self-neglect. And that was no longer serving her because she was angry and she felt misunderstood by others who she'd had these long-standing relationships with. And she was searching for a way to be herself in this new circumstances. But she just kept feeling this old pattern that she had of service toward others and being frugal and sacrificing her needs at the expense of others were no longer serving her, and she couldn't let go of this pattern. So she realized one day that she was just feeling so unappreciated and that she had compiled this enormous amount of resources and she didn't know what to do. So all of these men and this particular lady in this example, they felt angry and frustrated at this point in their life. Although they'd lived their lives in service to others and denied themselves and practiced a lot of discipline and self-discipline and, had great, strong family values in many respects, but they'd neglected some of their own personal needs and connections with others. So that in this new phase of their life, they were really at a loss as to how to operate. And these old patterns that were running that had helped them aspire and accumulate wealth and gain some popularity were failing them. So they'd all denied and sacrificed to achieve success in the world, especially financially. And they'd focused their energy and attention on money rather than on love, respect, and relationships. But more importantly, they were focusing everything on their plans and on their mental, this game that they had found was working for them in their life to accumulate and survive. But being in the now and learning to let go of the fear that had really driven them all their life to accumulate all of this stuff that had left them abandoned from true, deep, meaningful relationships, that really escaped them. That was their blind spot. But as time went on with each of these individuals, there was some self-recognition of what they had given up and what they had missed. And they'd heard of this concept of forgiving themselves, but they really didn't know how to do that. And they didn't really understand how to operate with humility. But with a little bit of time, they began to realize that this inner life is really just like nature. There are seasons and there are changes, and you have to really let yourself feel your feelings and to pray and meditate and allow yourself to feel things that when you're aspiring and running around real fast, achieving things, getting pats on the back or trophies or big bonuses or paydays, you have to be quiet with yourself and you have to be present in the moment, and you have to really learn how to connect with other people and let go of your own aspirations, some of your own feelings, which is interesting because sometimes these people were self-sacrificing, but they were consumed with their own drive and ambition. So it was kind of the opposite of letting go and allowing the feelings to come up that they had suppressed all these years. And so they did learn to forgive themselves, but they also had to realize that they had to face the consequences. And that was where humility came in. Eventually, they felt it was incumbent upon them to tell these people who really were making them feel unappreciated, or that's the way their old conditioning was set up. They were feeling unappreciated, but I think these individuals realized that it really wasn't about being unappreciated for what they had accumulated. It was more about being unappreciated for the things that they were withholding from the people in their lives. They were withholding the deeper feelings, the love, and the intimacy. And the things that they had missed out on, that's what they were withholding. And so when they told the significant people in their lives that they were sorry and that they were beginning to realize what they had done and missed, they looked for an immediate change, and they didn't see it happen. So they felt very frustrated with the forgiveness and self-forgiveness process, because they kept waking up day after day to the same old sense of being unappreciated. So this is what really stands in the way of so many people accepting the forgiveness that is available in the moment, is that you have to allow yourself time for these things to change. Now, who am I to say? It could happen overnight for some people. For others of us, it's a slow and gradual process because of several factors, but one of the things is that if you've lived in a driven, ambitious, self-sacrificing culture for years and years, and you've formed your identity and your values and the patterns in your head and your life around that model, then it's going to take some time for that model to soften and allow you to have the relationships that will bring you what you really would like to feel in your life. So, and in essence, forgiveness must occur at some point at the spiritual level, and it can't be faked. You can't just say it, and you can't force it. Did you hear me? I said I was sorry. No, that doesn't work. And ultimately, it's not about you forgiving other people for doing something that you've held wrong or an injustice, but it's about you accepting forgiveness with yourself deep down inside. And when that happens, your whole being does change. It changes from, like in these instances, from people who were sacrificing and aspiring and achieving and telling people, all the success strategies that you've heard that work in the world. They were seeing how that was also working against their deeper needs that were surfacing now at this new phase in their life. So they learned to let go of the ego-driven, the mental superiority that had defined them as individuals in the past. And once they let go of the forceful attitude and accepted forgiveness deep in their spiritual life for themselves, for what they'd neglected themselves of, then they were able to realize the real divinity inside of them that was so necessary to connect them to others on the real human level, rather than connecting on the material plane as the person that's giving them the check or writing them the paying their bills or giving them whatever they were accustomed to receiving on the material plane. And you can do both. But until you've really experienced this at a deep inner level, it's going to be difficult for you to really work on both the material and the spiritual at the same time. These patterns are so deep, they're etched into our DNA these days, and they've been passed on from generation to generation to generation. And I see these people really dealing with this self-forgiveness on a daily basis. For those of us who are successful with this process, it is a daily practice because those patterns are so strong, and they're related to our survival, and there's greed and ambition and a lot of fear that's ultimately behind the drive to separate you from other people as human beings rather than as just someone that gives them a check or is the one who's feeding them. So our culture and our society is so highly dependent upon these commitments that we make to ignore our feelings, our values, and our intentions that ultimately starve our spiritual lives. So try practicing deep forgiveness. Do it daily. It will change your life. I'm Roach, Mark Roach. All the best.